When I booted up Pokémon Emerald, I knew two things about it. I knew it had a more complete version of the story than Ruby and Sapphire, and I knew it introduced to the Battle Frontier, and both of those are great, but before playing it, I was always curious if that's really all it took to make Emerald so beloved. It's generally considered to be one of the best Pokémon games ever made. The answer is no, that's not all it took, because Emerald is so much more. In fact, what surprised and impressed me the most is its game design. From the very beginning, it's constantly teaching you and preparing you for its unprecedented postgame, and I'm not just talking about tutorials or the battle tents, which we'll definitely discuss later. There are substantial encounter design changes from Ruby and Sapphire that teach you how the battle system can be used, and it culminates in what feels like the developers pushing what was possible with the framework. Something I feel has been lost in modern Pokémon games. In Generations 1 and 2, there are some pretty considerable changes between the launch games and their upper versions, but aside from the story, most of them are underneath the hood. Quality of life, Pokémon rosters and movesets, and some minor location alterations. Emerald, on the other hand, is a very different game from Ruby and Sapphire, and that's true even in the base game. The story famously is much more complete and makes a lot more sense. Instead of thwarting Team Aqua's or Team Magma's plots, you face off against both, and both have their own goals and machinations throughout the game. It comes across as much more cohesive, especially in regards to Team Magma. In Ruby, they seek out Groudon at the bottom of the ocean. Don't get me wrong, underwater volcanoes absolutely exist, and I'm sure there are seafloor caverns all over the world, but Mount Chimney is right there. Emerald corrects this by having Magma's hideout be inside the volcano, and that's also where they awaken Groudon. Team Aqua's storyline is largely unchanged. They still have their base at the coast and find Kyogre in the seafloor cavern. There's also the addition of Rayquaza, which requires you to travel down toward Pacific Log Town and the Sky Pillar, which were completely optional and could easily be missed in Ruby and Sapphire, assuming you didn't try to explore everything on the map. There's also a bunch of area expansions, both in the base game and post-game, and Emerald uses other locations in the story far more. But new story, new areas, those are all well and good. What's more interesting to me is Emerald's game design. It's pretty different from any previous Pokémon game and hasn't really been translated to modern titles either. It all comes down to battles and how the game teaches you their nuances through exposure rather than outright tutorials. First of all, there are a lot more trainer battles in Emerald than in Ruby and Sapphire. Yellow and Crystal had a few more battles and some of them were rearranged, but Emerald has over 100 additional encounters. What's better is that double battles are used far more widely. In my opinion at least, doubles are very underutilized in the series. I kinda get Ruby and Sapphire having a relatively small amount of them. It was a new feature and a pretty big shift in gameplay. There are really only a couple dozen opportunities for doubles and only a small handful of mandatory ones. Emerald has hundreds. Most are optional, but many are not. Singles trainers are pretty much no different than in previous and modern games. They're cannon fodder, bundles of XP that just sorta get in the way, but almost every trainer that is positioned for a potential double battle is done so very intentionally. Let's take a look at a few examples. School Kid Jerry and Last Janice on Route 116 are one of many early introductions to doubles. It's pretty simple and easy, but it's the first one that has multiple types covered at the same time. The game is posing a question to someone new to the format. What do you do when you're up against more than one type? Okay, how about Picnicker Charlotte and Fisherman K on Round 114? This duo has you battling a Nuzleaf and a Barboach. These two complement each other by providing coverage and potentially punishing you if you bring certain type advantaged Pokemon. I'm not saying this battle is difficult, you'll be just fine. I'm saying Emerald is teaching you about type synergies in doubles. You can use different types of Mons and their moves to cover for each other, and you have to consider that the opponent may do the same. There are tons of encounters just like this strewn throughout the game, even when surfing, though they do rely heavily on Wingull. Finally, let's look at cool trainers Caitlin and Quincy in Victory Road. This is the final test before entering the Pokemon League, which was previously Wally in Ruby and Sapphire, who is now placed at the very beginning of the dungeon rather than at the end. I can see why though, because this double battle does something different than every other encounter up to this point. One starts with a Gardevoir and the other a Slacking. Gardevoir uses Skill Swap on the Slacking, taking away its truancy, a scary prospect on its own. It then uses Skill Swap on your Pokemon, giving it truancy. That is a very annoying and sophisticated strategy because slacking is now free to wreak havoc. Then, after beating those two, they reverse roles, with a Dusclops who also knows Skill Swap and another slacking. The same thing happens again, and you have to navigate it. This would have walled me as a kid. It's not something you typically see with generic trainer battles. Like the other examples in this section, it's not that it's super crazy difficult, though it is a spike. It's just another example of the game teaching you what is possible with the battle system and double battles specifically. Which leads us to the gym battles. They've all been updated with every gym leader gaining an additional Pokemon aside from Hoenn, who has replaced Wallace and had his team adjusted. Roxanne is comparatively disappointing with just an additional Geodude, but most gym leaders add a new Pokemon that messes with the type considerations a bit. Brawly gets a Metatype that can set up screens for the already bulky Makuhita. Watson swaps a Magnemite for an Electrike and then adds a Manectric. It's not a huge difference typing wise, but this was still the most challenging gym in the game for me, though that was really because I was underleveled and didn't have a ground type. Flannery swaps a Slugma for a Numel and gains a Camerupt, but you'll probably handle this fight with a water type or a ground type, so it doesn't make much of a difference. Norman adds a Lanoon that knows Belly Drum and 3 powerful attacks, so you'd best not let it get a move off. Winona adds Tropius with a Sunny Day build. And probably the most interesting change is Tate and Liza. The addition of Xatu and Claydol to their team turns the battle into much more of a puzzle. They have a lot of synergy. Claydol can set up Light Screen, which reduces the damage of the obvious water type direction. It can also spiral out of control with Ancient Power Omni boosts, given enough time. Xatu can pre-set up the Sun for Solrock and start spreading Confuse Ray. Then Lunatone and Solrock can come in for their usual play. It is a much more difficult battle than in Ruby and Sapphire. Hoenn has Wallace's team, but with Crawdaunt instead of Seaking and Kingdra instead of Milotic. On paper, this could add a lot more variance to the fight, especially because of Kingdra's unforgiving typing, but in my case, Sceptile just swept, though Kingdra was comically annoying with constant rest spam. These team alterations don't significantly increase the difficulty of the game, but they do expose the player to more type variety and different movesets that need to be responded to and learned from. These are more intentional team synergies that, once again, hint at what is possible with the battle system. But the primary reason that gym battles aren't truly difficult is because the Pokemon can be out-leveled and are not stat equalized. So when I entered Slateport City, I saw a new building and initially thought, wow, they redesigned the contest halls. But that isn't true, because this is the Battle Tent. It's a small challenge in 3 different locations that are meant to give you a preview of the Battle Frontier, specifically the 3 more unique types of facilities. The Slateport City Battle Tent has you selecting a team of pre-built Pokemon, you rent them, take part in 3 battles, and can exchange one of your Pokemon with each win. Levels are set and equalized. The Verdant Turf Battle Tent allows you to use your own team, but instead of selecting attacks each turn, your Pokemon selects the attacks. It's very random, but each Mon's nature influences the type of move they are more likely to use. The Fall Arbor Town Battle Tent again lets you use your own team, but this time it limits each matchup to 3 turns. If a Pokemon isn't knocked out in those 3 turns, the judge makes a ruling on who wins. There are 3 factors: mind, skill, and body. I'll talk about the specifics later on. Ultimately, I think the battle tents serve 2 purposes. They are a preview of the Battle Frontier, highlighting the most experimental facilities to encourage you to take part in them, but they are also meant to show that Pokemon can be much more difficult than the typical player might be used to, especially this early in the series. And all it takes are some simple number tweaks. This is because these battle tent mini challenges are not free. Most main stories in Pokemon games are. Opposing stats are set to the standard, while your stats are inflated, at least until Gen 4, but even after, between the natural leveling curve and the eventual party-wide XP share, it balances out. By contrast, the battle tents are scaled, and Pokemon stats are generally even, which means enemy Mons are going to be a lot bulkier and deal a lot more damage than you're used to. It was actually a bit of a shock for me. I had to try the Verdant Turf and Fall Arbor battle tents over multiple times to beat them. They're a wake-up call, and they're good design. You can engage with them and get yet another hint at what's possible with Pokemon battles, or you can just skip them and even come back later. But they're placed very intentionally. You are clearly meant to try them as you pass through. The final part of the base game is obviously the Elite Four and the Champion. The Pokemon League is actually kinda disappointing in comparison to the rest of the game. Each member has some minor roster and/or moveset changes, aside from Wallace, who has an entirely different team from Steven. But generally, the battles function just like they did in Ruby and Sapphire. Sydney's team constantly tries to throw you off, and yes, the shift tree is very annoying, as it always was when I played Ruby as a kid. I was really missing Parish Song this time around. Phoebe has a bunch of status moves. Glacia tries to circumvent your expectations in regards to type advantages with abilities and coverage moves, and if you're not careful, you might get OHKO'd. Drake just has a bunch of dragons, though the swap from a second Flygon to Kingdra is a solid twist, and Wallace is full of very bulky water types. It's just disappointing, because with how much they did with the rest of the base game, I feel more could have been done here. Why not have one or more double battles? Why not introduce some more unique strategies like at the end of Victory Road? Why not give some of the Pokemon more obscure and powerful held items, instead of just the Ace having a Citrus Berry? This type of thing is actually what famous ROM hacks like the Pokemon Kaizo series do, so it'd be nice to see it in an official Pokemon game someday. A base game, not just the post-game challenge modes or some DLC expansion. Anyway, let's talk about the post-game. It's absolutely packed with content, more so than Ruby and Sapphire, even when not considering the Battle Frontier, though much of it was available in those games too. With that said, a lot of it blends in with the base game. You can do and start many features before the Pokemon League, it just doesn't necessarily make sense to do so. There's a bunch of new areas, but most come down to allowing you to find a few unique Pokemon like the Legendaries, for example. Obviously, there are the Reggies, or the Legendary Giants as I recently learned they're called. I am perpetually impressed with the idea that people used to actually look up and translate the Braille messages. You basically had to if you didn't use an official guidebook, and it would have taken some serious work and dedication. There's no way my dodo brain would have ever figured that out. I never even found the sealed chamber, though to be fair, it's pretty well hidden. Even if I did find it, I wouldn't have been able to figure the puzzle out. So obscure, but oh so cool. Of course, there's the Ancients, the Weather Trio. Rayquaza is the same as in Ruby and Sapphire, but Kyogre and Groudon have you going on a short side quest for each. A meteorologist in the Weather Institute will tell you about a drought or heavy rain happening on a specific route. You then need to go to that route and find a randomly generated entrance to a cave, in which you'll be able to battle and catch Kyogre or Groudon, and they're both available in Emerald, which is nice. There are a ton of other new areas as well, one of which is Altering Cave. It has a little bit of neat trivia. It's an empty cave where you can only find Zubat, but it was supposed to be where Game Freak were going to distribute rare Pokemon via mystery gift. This never ended up happening, and the cave is now effectively cut content. Before we move on from the legendaries, I want to talk about Latios and Latias. In Ruby and Sapphire, the one you could find was based on the version of the game you were playing. Emerald allows you to find either, but not both, and it has a neat way to let you pick. Upon finishing the credits, you'll wake up at home. The TV will be on, and if you click it, a news report about flying Pokemon in the Hoenn region will be ending. Your mom then asks you what color the flying Pokemon was, and that's how you pick. Blue for Latios and red for Latias. It's simple, but I thought it was clever. While you're doing all this legendary hunting, there's trainer and gym leader rematches. You can use the Pokénav to identify who is ready for a rematch, and everyone on there can be rematched multiple times with increasing difficulty. The gym leaders are the most interesting because they're all double battles, and the teams keep expanding with higher levels, more Pokemon, and tweaked movesets. It's a great way for the game to continue exposing you to doubles and more complexity over time, all while reusing a huge amount of potential matchups in the game. However, this isn't just a post-game thing. I think the developers intended these to be done throughout the base game as well. There's a lot of backtracking and looping around the map in Emerald, so it may have been intended for you to run around and rematch quite a few trainers and gym leaders throughout your journey, but it definitely isn't necessary and isn't really pushed by the game. It's an option, and a good one. There's also Steven, who can be battled once in a Red-esque match in a newly unlocked area in Meteor Falls. His team is almost identical to Ruby and Sapphire, aside from some minor moveset changes and being a much higher level. It's a cool fight, but it's pretty easy overall. Like the Elite Four and Champion battles, I was very whelmed. I was hoping for more. It would have been nice if it was a double battle. Before we continue, I want to rapid fire some minor features that were also part of Ruby and Sapphire that aren't directly related to battling, but are just generally cool. I was never very interested in secret bases as a kid, and I'm still not, but they are a cool concept. I mean, who didn't want to have their own fort as a kid with all your favorite things? I certainly did. I just didn't really engage with them in Ruby. There are tons of decorations to collect and many ways to find them. It really is a substantial feature that I know is expanded upon in the future. Another feature I never really engaged with is contests. Not because I thought they were dumb or girly, I actually liked the concept when I was younger and still do. It was because I did not understand them in any way, yet more evidence that I was a dodo bird. They're actually really clever design. They have you building individual Pokemon with individual movesets to earn each type of ribbon, and it's a huge process to earn them all. There's a lot of strategy too. Different moves interact with different mechanics, some benefit from happening at a specific point in the turn order, some mess with other Pokemon, some combo with other moves in a specific way, and some rely on what the other contestants are doing to work. One particularly cool aspect of contests is why you would bother bringing a move that is not of the contest type you're performing in, such as cute, cool, tough, etc. It's the crowd. Every time a move is used that fits the contest type, the crowd cheers. If the bar for applause fills up on your turn, you get a ton of bonus hearts which translate to more points. So if you're trying to win, it can sometimes be advantageous to use a misaligned move to reduce the applause. You'll get less hearts on your turn, but it can allow you to manipulate the order to improve your chances of getting the boost. Or you can sabotage another Pokemon that is in a better position. It's really smart design and made me appreciate the system all the more. I also appreciate that there's only one contest hall in Emerald rather than 4 in Ruby and Sapphire. It just makes more sense. There's a bunch of other stuff scattered throughout the world, like Ash Collection on Mount Chimney or collecting the shards in Deep Ocean, and many more. Do these features need to be there? No. Do they hurt anything? No. Do they give you something to do just because? Absolutely, and it just makes the world feel more full. But let's get back to battling once again. It's time to talk about Trainer Hill. It's one of the most unique post-game activities. It's a relatively short gauntlet with 4 levels of difficulty. Each floor has 2 trainers, some can be challenged individually while others require a double battle, but you can always choose a double if you want. Unlike the Battle Frontier facilities, all items are completely allowed. The catch is that this is a timed game mode. Your objective is to clear the top floor as fast as possible, and that facilitates a lot of meaningful choice. Doing a single battle might be easier, but it eats up more time. You can use items all you want, but doing so takes time. You need to balance difficulty and recovery with the time aspect of the challenge. It's another example of great design that is very distinct from the other modes in the game. It can get pretty hard too. The Pokemon you face are trained, have strong movesets, and use powerful items. It's very similar to the Trainer Tower in Fire Red and Leaf Green, which like Emerald allowed the e-reader functionality with the correct peripherals and the right Pokemon cards, which is why it's separate from the Battle Frontier, where it would fit very nicely. Speaking of which, let's talk about the Battle Frontier. Emerald has been completely battle obsessed to this point. It has had me engaging with and thinking about battles in different formats and entirely new contexts. And the Adventures manga is the same. The Emerald arc is all battle strategy this and unique challenge that. It's almost entirely focused on the Battle Frontier facilities themselves rather than the actual Pokemon. By the way, you should totally read it. This series is great. The Battle Frontier facilities are some of the most interesting post-game features I've ever seen in a video game. The developers really seemed like they were trying to experiment with the battle system to see what was possible within its constraints, and they definitely succeeded. Not only does the Battle Frontier pose challenges that encourage you to think deeper about team building and decision making through team size limits and the restriction of non-held items, but it also takes a chance to just throw stuff at the wall. Maybe these more experimental facilities don't teach you as many valuable lessons, but they're just new ways to engage with the battle system that was already pushing 10 years of existence. The Battle Frontier wants you to learn to be a better battler. But because of the dichotomy between strategy-based design that could apply to all circumstances and the more experimental ideas that are there just for the sake of it, not all Frontier facilities are created equal. Let's start with the Battle Factory, because I think this is the facility that can teach the player the most and is the most interesting. In my opinion, it's the best designed facility. It's the only one that does not have you playing with your own team. Instead, like the Slateport Battle Tent, you rent Pokemon. When you win a match, you have the option to swap one Mon with those of your opponent. It's essentially a constantly evolving draft mode. Because you're bound to the Pokemon you're presented with, the Battle Factory has a much more gradual difficulty curve than the other facilities. Your opponents start with lower powered teams, but so do you. It's important to swap over time to get more powerful Mons that synergize well with each other, and synergies will change throughout the run. The Battle Factory not only has you adapting on the fly to new options, but it forces you to use very different Pokemon and movesets than you may be used to using. It will have you checking and comparing stats, abilities, and natures on many different Pokemon, all things that a casual player may not have thought to do until then. It's teaching you about these less apparent aspects of team building that drive the battle system, and it's doing so without forcing tutorial after tutorial down your throat. The Battle Dome is framed as a tournament. Whether singles or doubles, you pick 3 Pokemon to enter, and in every battle, you only get to pick 2 of those 3. This isn't particularly notable in singles, but in doubles, this is actually kinda interesting. Because there's no switching, the Pokemon you have are all you'll get. You need to plan your team around that, think about different weaknesses each have and how the other can fill them while capitalizing on each other's strengths. To help with this, the game gives you a preview of each match. You can see what Pokemon the opponent will have and their general battle style. I think this mostly suggests what move the opposing team has because the AI functions similarly regardless. I think there's a lot you can learn around assessing and preparing for upcoming opponents and structuring your team around covering as many bases as possible. All things considered, the Battle Pike isn't that experimental. It's just randomized rooms. There are single and double battles, some of which are considered more challenging, but in my experience, it just meant there was either a particularly bulky mon or one with a weird gimmick, and these all come with a heal afterward. There are rooms with wild Pokemon that you can just usually run away from. There are rooms that just heal one or more of your Pokemon. Conversely, there are also rooms that place a random status condition, and there are rooms where nothing happens at all. The most interesting thing about the Battle Pike is probably PP management. Without the use of any non-held items and without a guarantee of healing opportunities, PP is something that needs to be accounted for sometimes. It's also probably the fastest facility to clear, possibly rivaled by the Dome. I'm not going to call the Battle Palace the most experimental facility, but it's probably got one of the more unique concepts of the bunch. Like the Verdant Turf Battle Tent, it has you using your own team, but this time you don't control your Pokemon, they make all the decisions. Each move is assigned a category like attack, defense, and support. Which type of move a Pokemon is likely to use is influenced by their nature, and some won't allow a Pokemon to use a certain category at all. So, if this facility teaches the player anything, it just raises awareness of natures as a mechanic, albeit in a strange and indirect way. But honestly, I don't think there's much to learn here. The randomness has the potential to be frustrating, but the power level of opposing Pokemon is comparatively low, so it's pretty easy to just sweep most matches. Not to mention, the opponent is subjected to the same RNG as the player, though I'm sure the AI is allowed a bit of cheating. The Battle Pyramid is probably the most ambitious, challenging, and potentially frustrating facility of them all. You traverse randomly generated maze-like floors with extremely limited visibility. There are trainers you can encounter along with wild Pokemon, only some of which you can run from. Every time you clear a battle, your visibility gets a little better, emphasis on a little, and only until you reach the next floor. You can also find items that go in a pyramid unique bag. This is the only facility that allows the use of all items, but even out of facility held items are not allowed in when entering. You're limited to what you find in the Battle Pyramid. You need to stumble around until you find a portal to the next floor, and these floors can take a long time. They require a lot of PP and health management as well. Honestly, I don't think there's much you can learn from the Battle Pyramid other than that management. I think it's a challenge for challenge's sake. The Battle Frontier is already like a game within a game. The Battle Pyramid is like a game within a game within a game. The Battle Arena had me thinking it was cleverly designed to encourage you to think a little more deeply about movesets. Like the Fall Arbor Battle Tent, each matchup is limited to 3 turns. If a Pokemon doesn't fate within those 3 turns, the judge makes a decision based on mind, skill, and body. But once I looked at the details, I was a bit disappointed, because I don't really think this facility is meant to teach you anything particularly meaningful. It doesn't actually change how one might engage with a casual playthrough. Mind measures how many attacking moves are used. Skill measures the amount of moves that successfully hit. Body measures the amount of health left at the end. This just prioritizes spamming attacking moves over and over, most likely the same attacking move. You can't even switch Pokemon if you wanted to, and it doesn't even really reward the use of moves like Protect, Detect, and Fake Out, because the opponent doesn't incur a penalty when their attacks are prevented with these moves. Unfortunately, I think the Battle Arena is the weakest of the facilities. It could have been a lot better and more valuable if they made skill measure the amount of status, buff, and debuff moves used instead, because really, body already measures how much damage has been done. This could have taught the player that setup and status strategies can be just as effective, if not more effective, than just spamming attacking moves, and they often are. It's a missed opportunity. Finally, there's the Battle Tower, and what can I say? It's the Battle Tower, a string of battles with automatic healing between each one. There's a lot of them, and they can get pretty hard too, but compared to Crystal and Ruby and Sapphire, Emerald's Battle Tower is greatly expanded. For one thing, there is a double battle option, which is absent from Ruby and Sapphire for some reason. There's also a multi-battle option, which has you teaming up with an NPC in the same way you team up with Steven in the Space Center. Back in the day, you could even connect your Game Boy Advance with friends to play this mode together, as long as you had the appropriate hardware, which is pretty neat. Okay, I haven't spoken on the Frontier Brains yet because the Battle Frontier is definitely more than a symbol collection task, but the brains function as an effective goalpost to encourage you to try and push through the different facilities. Reaching a Frontier Brain for a silver symbol doesn't take too long, though it is still very much a challenge, but gold can easily take hours in any of the facilities and requires pure winning streaks. Their teams are appropriately powerful and well-built too, even containing legendaries at times. I just wish you could challenge the Frontier Brains in doubles as well. Game Freak puts so much effort into the Battle Frontier. Again, it's like an entire game within a game, and yet they couldn't be bothered to build a few additional teams for Frontier Brain doubles. I don't get it, but ultimately it's not a huge deal. It's a long and grueling challenge to reach the Frontier Brains, and it's very satisfying when you beat one. So, I haven't played every Pokemon game, and I've done the postgame in even fewer of them, but I feel like the Battle Frontier style postgame has been lost to time. Even just the Battle Tower doesn't seem to exist anymore. Scarlet and Violet were pretty focused on raids, and even though you could rematch some of the trainers in the Blueberry Academy DLC, it's not the same thing as even a Battle Tower, much less a full facility in the Battle Frontier. ZA was totally battle-focused and still doesn't have an equivalent, even the Mega Dimension DLC. And no, the fact that the battle system is so different does not matter. There were plenty of tough challenges in that game that could have been expanded upon. Arceus at least had the Eternal Battle Reverie. That really does push its battle system to the limits, and it can get really hard. It has decent replayability as well, but it still doesn't compare to the Battle Frontier. It's like Game Freak has decided that the presence of online matchmaking and ladder climbing makes up for it, but competitive PvP is not the same thing as challenging, unique single-player formats. I've loved playing Champions, but that game could really use a single-player mode. Even the way Emerald teaches you about its mechanics and features doesn't seem present in modern Pokemon games. Like at all. The games are too easy to really facilitate that, with the Legends games being notable exceptions. Emerald really does put the modern Pokemon titles to shame. Throughout this retrospective series, I've made repeated reference to the fact that I was a bit of a dodo bird as a kid. I really didn't understand Pokemon battles when I was younger, and honestly didn't really understand them until I started this series, despite the fact that I've been watching competitive Pokemon for years now. It has been illuminating and really fun to actually learn how stats, enemy AI, and RNG work in these games. I've gone from realizing that preparing specific Pokemon based on type effectiveness is a good way to beat Red and Blue, watch out, we got a real expert over here, to completing Nuzlocke with different rule sets, to reaching Master Ball rank in Champions, which I know isn't a huge deal, but felt like a significant accomplishment for me. Yet after playing Emerald, I can't help but wonder if I would have had a better understanding of Pokemon battling if I had played it as a kid, because the game wants you to be a better battler, and it does a lot to teach you how. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Let me know what your favorite Battle Frontier facility is in the comments, and please consider liking and subscribing if you've enjoyed this. I've also opened YouTube memberships if you're interested, and I have a 100% free Patreon to post updates and behind-the-scene tidbits. Feel free to check it out. Thank you so much for watching.